it really feels like Solana has got an unstoppable trajectory. I think what they're trying to do right now is to actually get the opinions of the experts in the room. We're really pushing and fighting the good fight for Solana into the SEC and trying to make sure that our network grows healthily and consistently. Set up to the community to make sure that they see that micro favor success.
GM and welcome back to Solana Floor. It's been a massive week for Solana's validator landscape, with the SEC making some critical announcements that feel like a full 180 from where we were under Gary Gensler's iron fist. To figure out how this is likely to impact us all, I'm joined by Seb and Brandon from FaZe Labs, who actually pitched the SEC on staking prior to all of this going down. Brandon, Seb, GM, and welcome to Solana Floor. Before we get started, are you guys able just to give me a quick overview of FaZe Labs and what your roles are there?
Thank you so much for that, Finn. So my name's Seb Moriarty. I'm the co-founder and CMO at FaZe Labs, and yeah, I guess we're really kind of a tech company. We build a different kind of tooling, or we have built different kind of tooling in the ecosystem, and we've really found our area of focus to be crypto taxes, staking, and that's kind of really where we're putting all of our efforts into.
Beautiful. So my name is Brandon. People know me as Devour. I also co-founded FaZe here with Seb, and I am the CEO.
The all-encompassing overlord. Great. So to my understanding, FaZe Labs pitched the SEC before this all went down and dissected the intricacies of staking, what it is, how it works, and why it benefits everyone. Are you able to tell me the story of how you went about pitching the SEC and what compelled you to do that in the first place?
Yeah, so that was an interesting one. So it was actually our CFO. His name's Dan. So Dan actually found the letter from Hester Pierce, created a big letter asking a bunch of questions, right? They're very open-ended questions about, hey, look, how is the crypto world evolving? All experts in the crypto world, can you please help me answer these questions? And then attached to that was a request for a meeting. And so we actually put a request in, but our request was a little bit different. Our request was for asking for clarity, right? Asking for clarity around what they currently see, which I don't think they had a huge opinion on at the moment. So when we asked for that, they actually wrote back to us after doing some research on us, and they asked for us to come in and actually speak on our experience in Solana staking, what we see. And yeah, we kind of went there and broke it down, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. We also did something that was pretty funny. We went there, we're probably the only team that did this. We went there without legal counsel, which really showed that we really just went to talk and dissect Solana staking. We didn't come in there with a bunch of legal requests, none of that. So yeah, we just applied and spoke about our expertise, which I think was refreshing and they appreciated.
Cool. What kind of questions did they ask you?
So the experience in the room was actually pretty vast, right? So half of them were lawyers, and so we had to speak, some of the concepts we covered were in layman's terms, but the other half, a few of them anyways, were engineers. So they asked us questions about, time to finality, all this stuff. So the questions actually came from a really wide array. I'd actually say very little of the questions were in the middle. It was either deeply technical or it wasn't at all.
And if you could kind of synthesize the mood, did they feel like they were just going through the processes that there's something they had to do, or did you feel like there was genuine interest and genuine engagement in what you were saying?
See, that was a funny thing. I thought that there would have been, when they, read this, and maybe it's just, my past view of the government, but there might have been like an agenda to look at us and be like, oh, well, how can we stick it to them, right? How can we, go after them after this meeting? And that's why it was not advisable to go in without legal counsel. We did it anyways, but their entire questions were only focused on understanding exactly how this entire system works. It was genuine, actual interest and concern. They're trying to be very forward thinking because they don't want to just approve it without knowing exactly what they're approving and potential implications down the line.
So late last week, the SEC declared that it does not consider staking to involve the offer and sale of securities under existing securities laws. So that's a bit of a mouthful of legal speak. What does this actually mean for the average Solana holder? And what does it mean for institutional funds who are looking at stepping into the Solana ecosystem?
Yeah, so I think, what does it mean for the average user? It means that you're not going to have, basically for people that have validators or companies that have that, they're not providing a security offering. which is huge. For the average user, they don't have to worry about the SEC, going down their back because they were involved with an unregistered security, stuff like that. It's pretty big all around. And this goes for small and large companies. So all the way up from small companies that run validators, all the way up to large funds that run validators or start to stake with other validators. This is all now no longer a security, which is really, really big because securities come with a bunch of legal and regulation paperwork. It's a nightmare to get through, and so it's really big. I think the thing that stuck out to me the most, in layman's terms, right, when you run a validator, you're providing security to the network, and so what they said is providing security isn't a security, and I think that's probably the easiest way to put it.
And so, like I said, it has been a pretty dramatic couple of weeks for Solana staking. Just around Accelerate time, we saw that Canary Capital made amendments to their ETF filing to include staking. They named Marinade as their exclusive native staking partner, so that's really cool for them. How important is the inclusion of staking services to an ETF?
Yeah, I think, it's a big step in the right direction. I think it's also kind of like, something unique that Solana and blockchains, proof of work blockchains like proof of stake blockchains like Ethereum have is like you can actually prevent dilution from your assets. Like when you have Bitcoin ETPs and things like that, or ETFs, like you kind of hold Bitcoin and that's it. There isn't really kind of any yielding ability there. But with staking, like on Solana, now people can have their SOL staked and they can earn inflationary rewards on that SOL, and they don't get diluted due to the network's production of additional SOL by block rewards and such. So I think it's a really big step. I think it's really cool that they did this kind of native stake pool approach in a sense. There's multiple validators in a pool. This is definitely something that we've been talking about for quite a while at FaZe Labs under our company Sentinel, which is like our institutional staking arm. How do you spread this across multiple validators to kind of increase and enhance security? Also, have security around those nodes like SOC 2 and things like that. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a step in the right direction. It makes complete sense. Just having an ETP where they just hold SOL doesn't really make total sense in a staking world, because you can now provide increased yield and returns for people that are participating in these funds through staking, and that also helps to decentralize and protect the network. Obviously, decentralization is a big part of this. So having multiple validators being part of these kind of like groups or these staking service providers is important, so that we have this like distribution of stake across the network. But yeah, I think it's really a push in the right direction, and I think it's going to happen on Solana sooner than we think. Probably. Hopefully it's us first. ETH's probably the bigger whale in the room. They might get the staking ETPs first, but I think Solana is very, very close behind.
So Seb seems pretty optimistic that Solana ETFs are coming very soon. Brandon, where do you think we're at in terms of approvals, and when can we expect Sol ETFs to hit Wall Street?
Yeah, so I think they asked us this question actually very pointedly. The SEC did. They asked us, like, why have we seen more movement on the ETH side than the Solana side in terms of these filings? And we answered very honestly, right? I think our answer was, to be honest, we're not sure, right? We don't have the answer as to why there haven't been as many filings. I think this has actually changed over the past few weeks. By the way, there's been a lot more filings for Solana and staking with Solana ETPs, but we answer very honestly, like, we don't know. But in our opinion, Solana is way more suited for a staking ETP. And I think that we're starting to see a shift, but I'm not sure how long it's going to take. I do agree with Seb's sentiment that it's going to be sooner than we think, because usually these things take like years to approve, right? They take a very long time. This time I think it's going to be shorter than that, but I'm just not sure how long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Does having the Bitcoin and the Ethereum ETFs already in place and showing signs of protecting investors and maintaining inflows, does that help the Solana case?
I think so. I think that that's precedent, right? And I'd say, especially for someone like the SEC who doesn't have, some of them do, but I'd say overall as an org doesn't have the super technical understanding that people who have their full-time jobs in Web3 do. The differences between these chains, they just see it as setting precedent, and I think that's good, right? The potential of like walk so we could run type of deal. And so I do think that it's positive. I think the issue that they are addressing now, for the exact reason that you mentioned, right? Because they included Ethereum ETPs without staking, and it didn't see a whole lot of inflows. So they're trying to bring in staking into it and doing it in the right way. And so that's why I think we're kind of seeing a bit of a holdup, because they want to make sure they do it correctly.
Yeah, I want just to add on top as well. I kind of think it's interesting with Solana. We do, now there's that 2.5-day epoch or whatever. To unstake your souls, we have instant unstake that's been developed on Solana as well. There's also obviously the Solana Policy Institute that came out like 2 months ago or not even, and they've been absolutely going at it when it comes to kind of helping to build this policy and things like that, which I think is really kind of pushing things forward for Solana. And I think at the same time as well, it's just like Solana it's still like a somewhat new technology in the eyes of people, especially regulatory people, because, Bitcoin and Ethereum are well known, they're well understood, they've been around for a long time, they're kind of like the OGs, so, we like, until those have really been accepted and kind of there's good policy around them, how could we expect something like Solana to get that treatment as well? Because they're still wary,
Yeah, and to go back on the timeline thing, right? Just to answer to also give a little bit more of a pointed answer. I think what they're trying to do right now is to actually get the opinions of the experts in the room, right? And so getting those opinions take a long time, right? Having us talk to them, which I guess they viewed us as an expert, which is awesome. But getting all of these expert opinions takes a long time, right? So for instance, they asked us to draft up a framework for how we would include staking in an ATP and what that would involve and what restrictions would apply, what would, validators, validator sets, stuff like this. So they're trying to get all of these opinions before they craft their own. Because we did point blank ask them, what is your opinion on this? And they were very also pointed in saying, we don't have one, right? That's why we're here.
I'm going to switch gears a wee bit. Everyone loves the idea of institutional funds pouring into Solana. It brings unprecedented liquidity, numbers should go up, that's what everyone really wants. But are there any potential downsides or risks to this? Like, imagine if Fidelity, Franklin Templeton, and VanEck, all these TradFi giants all pull together and they've got 3 of the largest 5 validators on Solana. Like, is that a risk to us? What does that mean for decentralization? What does that mean for smaller validator operators? What's your take here?
Yeah, so I'll give a little bit of info on this, and then Devour can also follow up there. Like, I mean, this is a big part of the framework that was kind of pitched to them, which was like kind of stake decentralization, which is to prevent this from happening, because there's this thing called the like Solana's Byzantine fault tolerance, which is like how well can the network run with like a specific portion of like basically bad stake, so. Yeah, this is the big issue, because if these ETFs come in and they centralize into a small group, that's not good for the network. Then that's just another reason why Solana is centralized. And I think that becomes a really narratively bad issue, and also just like a really bad issue for decentralization and for the chain. So yeah, I mean, it's already very challenging to get stake on the network. I think, thanks to stake pools, there are a lot of operations that can actually, or new validators that can get started up and work to kind of bring in more stake. It's great, but at the same time, I think there's a real opportunity here for the SEC to be part of something that's actually like positive for the ecosystem. Like, let's not make the same mistakes that we've made in the past, maybe in like kind of TradFi and things like that. Like, this is a new, kind of economy, it's a new digital economy. Like, there are ways to prevent centralization and to create healthy networks, and in the end of the day, protect investors as well. And that's the SEC's main job, is to protect, investors. So it's like, by creating stake decentralization and helping to create a framework around that, you're protecting the people that you want to protect, and you're not, bringing any kind of harm to them or potential harm to them.
So would you expect to see a variety of products like Marinade Select, where staking providers will kind of curate a list of secure elite validator sets for institutional funds to commit to?
I would say it depends. And so my answer on this is how the SEC views LSTs, right? So I think that there's something that's really certain that Gito just recently posted about, is they're no longer taxable, right? And so, which is a really big thing, because swapping usually from SOL to another token was always viewed as a taxable event. And so that's why a lot of institutions just right off bat would stay away from that. They don't want to incur a taxable event right away and then swapping back another taxable event, right? It doesn't make sense. But the one thing that they haven't talked on yet is whether they view an LST as like a security, right? Because that's actually a very big consideration. And so I'd say it depends, right? Because what Marinade did is they did a native stake pool. It's something that they made in-house, native stake. You stake it, create stake account that splits across a bunch of validator sets. But what there already exists is LST stake pools. And so if they don't view those as securities, which I don't think they should, then that's probably just going to be the easiest way. And then you can have, diversified stake to a very large degree, which I'm a very big fan of.
Something we're seeing grow in popularity is the idea of a Solana Treasury company. Sol Strategy started this, but we've since seen UPEXE pop up. DeFi Dev Corp is amassing huge amounts of Sol. Will they repeat the success of Michael Saylor's MicroStrategy playbook? Or is there kind of any potential risk or adverse market conditions that could happen? Could we see these companies unwind at the first sign of fear? What's your position on Sol Treasury companies?
Yeah, I think it's a good question because it is interesting to see this happen in real time, especially in the last few months. It's really become like a large talking point. And I think, with Sol Strategies and DeFi Dev Corp coming out, it's like, it's obviously like exciting. Like, oh, these companies are accumulating all the Sol, and, everyone always, loves to talk about Saylor and MicroStrategy, and it's like, it's good for the asset. In terms of price, I guess people are, more Sol being bought equals higher price. But I think it's one of those things where it's like, it really all just depends on how well Solana does in the long term, right? It's kind of like, these companies are obviously making a leverage bet on Sol. They are buying and accumulating as much Sol as possible. They aren't looking to sell this Sol. That's what they say, obviously, unless there's some crushing bear market, or, Solana has some insane black swan event and it just, dwindles in users and price drops drastically, and they'll have to make a change. So I guess it's really hard to kind of like determine what is actually going to happen. I mean, obviously we're all bullish on Solana. We love Sol. It seems that it can do no wrong at this point, other than maybe, people don't like it for meme coins. But other than that, like, it really feels like Solana has got an unstoppable trajectory. It's like, you look at, if I think of the top 3 blockchains, I'd be like Bitcoin, ETH, Sol. These 3 things have something that the others don't, and vice versa. It's like, it's very hard for something to be, a magnitudes faster than Solana now, but it was easy for Solana to be magnitudes faster than ETH, and it has a really strong battle-tested community. We've all been through so much. It's like, even if you were like, we were at Accelerate, and we met each other at Accelerate at the Sanctum event, and there was this energy. Everyone just is very excited about what's happening, and regulation is coming in, and we teams are talking to the SEC about stuff. So it definitely feels like we have this this bright future, and I think these teams are betting on that. And I think, like any company, if things go to shit, like they're gonna have to pivot, or they're gonna have to sell assets and move. So I would say that I hope that we see the same wins as MicroStrategy for these companies, and my inner bull, Solana bull, is saying we will. So I think at the end of the day, like, that's the positive. I don't know if there's really any massive negative, other than, like, I think, and I was watching a podcast the other day and they were talking about this, but it's an interesting kind of like business model, because, again, going back into staking and earning off of, because these companies have their own validator businesses, like Sol Strategies, DeFi Dev Corp, they run their own nodes, they run their own validators, they stake their Sol assets, and therefore they earn an increased APY return on their Sol, which is unique. You can't really do that at such a great scale like you can on Sol. I mean, but this just brings into the discussion of, like, how is that going to look in future with inflation? Are we going to have a massive reduction, whatever? But yeah, I think these companies are well situated. I think they're getting it at a good time, and I guess it's just dependent on how well Solana does in the coming years, which I believe it will do very well.
Yeah. I think if the Solana ecosystem has proven one thing over the years, it's that it's eternally hungry, and that people are always pretty eager to get things done and get things shipped. So yeah, fantastic to hear. Guys, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything lingering that FaZe Labs wants to share, or?
I think I wouldn't be a good CMO if I didn't plug our our company and our different businesses. But please give us a follow on Twitter at FaZe Labs, and check out Netrunner, which is our Solana tax tool. We also run AeroPool, which is a Solana stake pool, and we really delegate to different validators in the ecosystem and help educate new operators and teams on how to get validators started. And then Sentinel is the institutional arm, and we're really pushing and fighting the good fight for Solana, and talking to the SEC, and trying to make sure that our network grows healthily and consistently. So yeah, dude, thank you so much for having us, man. Really appreciate it. And yeah, Devour, if you have any closing remarks?
No, I would follow up with exactly what you said, right? If you're interested in not going to jail because you want to do your taxes, stay up to date with Netrunner. If you're interested in anything SEC institutional related, stay up to date, because we're going to be submitting that soon. And then if you're also interested in the people that run this network and the contributors to it, pay attention to Arrow. And if you just want to pay attention to all three, just pay attention to FaZe Labs.
Top. All right. Brandon, Seb, thank you so much for coming on.
Cheers, Finn.